Hello, and welcome to Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. This is episode 11, in which we are covering the Legend of Vox Machina, episodes 4, 5, and 6 in the first season. My name is Sam Marvin. I'm your co-host. With me here is Sean Briggs. Sean, how you doing?
Doing fine on this Monday evening. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Before we jump into our summary and commentary on the Legend of Vox Machina Season 1. Real quick plug for our Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. Our email address, elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Send us an email if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc. As always, please rate, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. And spoiler alert for the Legend of Vox Machina show and the Vox Machina live stream. Sean, anything else you want to add before we jump into it?
Also, spoiler warning for Mighty Nine and Bell's Hells as well. We might talk about stuff besides Campaign 1 of Critical Role that comes up. We'll try not to, or at least give you warning ahead of time, but I might slip, so I'm warning people ahead of time. And like Sam said, please share with any friends or family that you have. Starting off our recap with episode 4. This episode is titled Shadows at the Gate. Percy has a flashback showing even more of what has happened to his family. Lady Briarwood realizes that her journal has been taken. Silas says not to worry, we have ways of getting it back. She then has a cool necromantic moment in the graveyard. The party is placed under house arrest. Their weapons are taken from them, and after a short time, they decide to try and escape, but the Sovereign's guards stop them. They are placed into groups of 2 and 3. Pike continues to have a difficult time connecting to the Everlight. The guards begin to get attacked by ghost-type creatures. They are getting slaughtered. Vox Machina breaks out of their house arrest as the guards are falling back as they begin to hear sounds of battle going on in the courtyard outside. They are attacked and fall back to the kitchen. They seem to not be able to hit the ghosts, and they seem to want the journal as they keep attacking Scanlan, who is holding Lady Briarwood's journal. Captain Jarrett discovers they don't like light as he begins to try to light a torch. Pike can't summon her powers, and just as they're about to die, Keyleth shoots a sunbeam out from underneath the table. While in the light, the ghosts can be hit, and the team quickly dispatches them. Captain Jarrett allows them to leave if they promise to make those responsible for his men being killed pay. As we know, that is Lord and Lady Briarwood. Now, again, Sam, as we go through these episodes, we tend to not have much of a critique. So, like we said in the last episode, I'm going to have to figure out a different way to take notes as we begin to talk about these episodes. So I went through, and my new commentary method or note-taking method is going to be, what are my highlights for the episode?
All right.
So we'll let you start off first. What are some of your highlights as you go through?
Highlights for this episode, definitely the horror scenes. So the attack of the Wraith shadow creatures, the way that the wounds manifested themselves and this kind of dark blood pouring out of the victims. That was great. Really good tension with how are they going to get out of this challenge. The light discovery, was the trigger, but that kind of came in a moment of desperation and it worked really well. That was certainly a highlight for me. The humor of the episode at points, especially while they're in captivity, was really good. And then I think Scanlan especially can deliver great humor even in the midst of these tense moments. And again, it's something that's really only possible with an animated show. You would not, if this were live action, it would be it would be such a clash of tone. But you can pull it off with animation because of just
goofy. It's goofy already.
It's goofy already. Yeah, it was possible to do. So that for me, I think was the two sides of that coin: the humor and the horror. That was certainly the highlight for me. What about you?
Well, so I'll start by saying the humor. The last episode, we got our first ball tag. I don't know if we actually talked about it that much in the last episode because it was episode 3 as we were kind of winding down. But the whole concept of ball tag is hilarious. And when, oh God, who is it? Oh, it's when Vax hits Grog and he goes, oh, it's a 3-pointer. Oh, they didn't even say it. He goes, oh, 5. It's like tie now, 5-5 or whatever. And then Pike goes, wasn't it just 5-2? And then Scanlan goes up. That was a 3-pointer. The rules of ball tag are very intense. But then we get like this episode, and when they take all the cutlery away because they could be used as weapons, and then Scanlan's like, well, what am I supposed to eat? And Captain Jarrett goes, make a fucking sandwich. I don't care. He's like, fine, I'll make a fucking sandwich. And then just like how they can use that, he's spilling mustard onto the journal and he's wiping it up, and it's just slapsticky stuff that.
And he does that, isn't he doing that like he's making a sandwich in the background with like a relatively serious conversation between Vex and Vax. And so it really is, it's this like it's constantly there. And that would be something where when you're playing a D&D game, as this is based on, you can't do that. You can't have somebody silently doing an action in the background while two people are having a conversation in real time. You can narrate eventually while they're doing that, I'm doing this. But in a cartoon, you can have those two things. And I think it, again, goes back to what we're talking about with it's how you get humor into a tense situation is these real quick asides, things silently happening in the background.
Yeah, because in that, you mentioned a conversation between Vex and Vax. Isn't that where they're discussing possibly leaving because like, this isn't worth it? We can get out. The whole party might not be able to, but we've always done this. So yeah, I don't know, cool conversation, but funnier thing going on in the background. Another thing that I really liked is the visualization of magic. And you kind of brought it up a little bit with how the attacks of these wraiths looked. And even after Vex gets attacked, she kind of runs away, but she still has like that black ooze coming from her eyes for the rest of the fight until everyone else gets attacked and they all have it as well. But you get that, you get Delilah Briarwood in the cemetery casting the spell and her hand transforms into like that claw as it goes into the ground. And then all of the like necromantic magic going through the headstones and all of that. It's just, it's really cool. And then kind of like a passing point with this is just the different character races in the background. We see one of the guards before they get just obliterated. Also, can we talk about so anybody who plays D&D, and it's kind of like Skyrim, you never really want to like get in a fight with guards because when you're low level, they'll just destroy you. The guards in this episode are just taken out so quickly. It's like one hit. How many hit points do these guards have? Right?
I'm assuming they have one hit die, right? And my guess is that those shadow wraiths are doing like drain life where you lose a hit die or something like that and they drop to 0 instantly. This is the DM and me trying to translate everything into an actual encounter design.
Yeah, I just remember watching that episode for the first time last year and just thinking, oh man, like these things are way tougher than these characters are ready for. And then, they barely win the fight. But anyway, I digress. Seeing the other characters in the background, like we see a tiefling, there's elves, half elves, humans. I think there's an orc as a guard. And that's a cool thing about Critical Role as well. Matt Mercer kind of gets away from the stereotype that certain races are evil. So when you watch Critical Role, either the game or Vox Machina, you're going to see stereotypically evil characters not in evil roles, which, yeah, great, because that has very racist and xenophobic undertones dating back to the 70s with Wizards of the Coast and in most fantasy, I guess. But yeah, cool to see just the diverse background, all the different races available in D&D populating this world.
Yeah, that's always fun. And it's a good way it's a really easy way to demonstrate the exotic, magical nature of the world. Without you could say, oh, well, this is a human civilization, so everybody's human. But at the same time, they're doing magic and they're fighting dragons and all this other stuff. We'll just emphasize how this is a fantasy setting by making it a diverse fantasy setting with, all of these. You mentioned a tiefling or tiefling or tiefling. I should, and whatever floats your boat.
I pronounce it tiefling.
Those are in the lore of Dungeons and Dragons. Those are creatures that are spawns of hell, basically demons and devils in their ancestry. And so, Sean, you just mentioned that this is one way to, subvert expectations that those creatures would be evil, but it's just a really great way to kind of present this wonderful mosaic of characters.
Yeah. And then furthermore, in episode 4, we talked last episode, just the sheer amount of content that they're trying to slim down into a 30-minute episodic medium. And with all of these like brief flashbacks that we're getting, I feel like they're covering hours of material and they're finding ways to cram it into a 30-minute episode. So with Percy's flashbacks, that, if I recall in the stream, that takes up a lot of time of them either communicating, Percy having one-on-one conversations with individuals where he relays a little bit more information, a little bit more. And in this, we just get like a 45-second flashback that probably covers hours of content from the stream, and just a really ingenious way of going from one long form storytelling into a shorter form storytelling.
Yeah. And the thing that strikes me is that when you play Dungeons and Dragons, the combat takes so long. If you have a party of 7 people and you have multiple locations where they are fighting, and you have the guards and you have the wraiths or the shadows, that fight alone would take half an episode or more. But because it's a visual medium, you don't have dialogue, you don't have dice rolls and action and movement and all that. It just happens really quickly. And so you can then, and unlike D&D, where even though these are great improvisational actors who have been playing D&D for hours and at this point years with one another, their dialogue is great, but if you're putting together a 25-minute show, you're going to spend weeks on your script or a significant amount of time on your script. So it's punchy, it hits the right tones, you get the humor in there, and it is just, like you said, you can translate 4 episodes, 12 or 13 hours worth of a live stream game into 25 minutes.
One little Easter egg that I caught that I didn't catch any of the other times that I've watched this episode. And like I said, for Rings of Power, since we started doing this podcast, whenever I watch something that we're covering, I pay so much more attention to what's happening in the episode. So for this one, I caught it. This is probably like my 6th time watching this episode. But the table in the kitchen is their real life D&D table that they play at in the stream. Did you notice it?
No, I did not.
No? Okay. Because their table has a very interesting shape. It's like a arrowhead where the tip that would attach to the arrow itself, the wood, that's where Matt Mercer sits. And there's a cutout in the table for him. It's exactly the table. It's really cool. But that's the one that Grog destroys when he gets dropped by the Wraith after it's sucking his life out. But cool Easter egg. And then one of the last things with this episode, we have Pike splitting the party. She still has some issues with reaching out to her goddess, the Everlight. In the episode or in the series, she goes off to try to fix that by finding a temple to the Everlight. Now, Sam, do you want to give a little background as to why she splits the party in the stream?
Yeah. So in the stream, the actress, Ashley Johnson, was starring or co-starring in the show Blind Spot, which filmed in New York. And so for much of the season 1 or the campaign 1 of Critical Role, she was gone. And for certain key events or shows or fights, she would remote, call her in on Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever it was, and she would come in. But a lot of times either Pike was just not there or Pike was played by the DM and would do not much more than heal or cast pretty rudimentary spells. So this is a really good way. This is a nod to that. And also it kind of sets up Pike's dramatic arc in this season and in this story, and kind of highlights Pike's kind of self-doubt and vulnerability, which were things that were also true to the character on the show. But that's why Pike kind of splits off somewhat out of the blue, but that reflects both the reality of the show and the dramatic direction they chose to go.
Yeah. And then Sam, you have one more point here with Jarrett.
Oh, yeah. So kind of similar to little nods to the stream and little changes that they've made from the stream to the anime. Jarrett, the captain of the guard in the animated show, works for the Sovereign or is a public employee, a captain of the city guard. In the show, he's kind of a mercenary who works for Vox Machina, and he is the leader of the guards of their keep. So a little bit of a flip there. He was kind of a party favorite. He would show up in multiple episodes over the course of the live stream, and chances are we have not seen the last of him in the show as well, even though I don't think we see him again for the remainder of this season.
No, and I think they set it up a little bit too for him to kind of take that role as, well, at least being under the employ of Vox Machina. I'd like to see that anyway. And I think having his entire company of guards killed.
Yeah.
How do you go back and not get demoted of some?
And then he let them all go, right? He's like, all right, I'm just going to let you go.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it'd be cool to bring it full circle and then have him be under the employ of Vox Machina moving forward in future episodes.
Yeah, I think we could see that. We could see that happening.
Next up, I'm going to do 2 in a row just because I feel like it. Episode 5 is called Fate's Journey. So here's your quick recap. The party leaves their keep with a mission to defeat the Briarwoods. Captain Jarrett lets them go. Vex, Vax, and Keyleth break into Gilmore's where they are apprehended. They eventually leave, having purchased various items for fighting vampires, including holy water. The rest of the party steals a wagon and horses for the journey to Whitestone, which is Percy's former abode. On their travels, they get attacked by these undead wolves with tentacles, which were summoned by Lady Briarwood. The wagon and horses fall off a cliff during the fighting. Scanlan also falls off the cliff, but he saves himself with Scanlan's hand. An undead wolf is able to grab Lady Briarwood's journal and bring it back to her. Silas and Delilah Briarwood invite a group of villagers to the castle for dinner. Vox Machina makes it to Whitestone to see a village cast in clouds and darkness. No one is in the streets. Guards and zombie giants are patrolling those streets. Vox Machina comes across the sun tree, and it has the villagers from the dinner hanging via noose. The villagers are all dressed up like the members of Vox Machina. Well, we have a creepy moment, and this is one of the more iconic moments from the stream. The players coming across, you see real consequences of your actions. Well, not really. This is kind of just Briarwoods being super shitty. But yeah, having NPCs hanging by their necks, dressed as you, as a warning, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, I think it's a way for, I think in the live stream, it was a way for Matt to demonstrate the seriousness of the situation for the players, to telegraph how brutal the Briarwoods could be. Because prior to that, and they had the backstory that Percy told them, and they had the one fight in the the courtyard at the castle, but they didn't know really what the Briarwoods were capable of. They didn't know what they were up to, and so this was a way to say they're not going to mess around. They're not going to negotiate. There's no exchange of prisoners. They're not going to retreat. They're going to kill as many people as they need to, and they're going to do this just to needle you. And we should mention, like, it was featured prominently. One of the villagers was a little girl who was dressed up like Pike, which I think she was voiced by Liam O'Brien's daughter in the show.
Oh, yeah, could be.
I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that was iconic, brutal scene.
So one of the two things that I really wanted to talk about, again, with humor, and I'm going to be biased because Scanlan is my favorite character, and I'm not going to shy away from this, but when he's so these undead wolves have multiple tentacles, and one of the tentacles is holding on to the journal, another tentacle is holding on to Scanlan, and then during the chase scene, a third tentacle goes into Scanlan's mouth. And there's a moment where he goes, but then he goes, oh, and just like he very well could die. And then he falls off the cliff soon afterwards. But just that comic relief that he's getting like sexual enjoyment from the tentacle being in his mouth in the moment was very funny. And it, like you said, scatters in some like very intense dark moments, that humor that can like pull you out of it. Just great timing.
Yeah, I don't remember if I noticed that the first time I watched it, but when I rewatched it most recently, that got an audible laugh from me, because it's so funny. And also just that took up 2 seconds of screen time, right? It's just such a great way to get the humor that you want in the show. I agree. Scanlan is probably my favorite character as well. Actually, might be between him and Grog. Grog has some pretty great moments also, but Scanlan is just on a whole nother level.
We have a similar point, but I'm going to let you take it. The only thing that I wrote was just the horses being killed was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Happens a lot in D&D where your steeds kind of, I guess think back to like Lord of the Rings, how many horses die, not in real life. No horses were harmed in the filming of Lord of the Rings, but how many CGI horses were killed during like the charge of the Rohirrim, or so many different times. So I guess it tracks in fantasy, but
it does.
What you had a point where it's a cheeky way to tie it into the stream. So I'll let you cover that.
So in the live stream, the party, I don't recall them having a wagon, but they did get some horses, and they rode horses through the mountains to go to Whitestone. And along the way, they stopped and they fought a group of harpies, so winged, humanoid, evil creatures, and they defeated them. And then at some point, they had to tie the horses up to continue on foot through the mountains because it was just getting too rugged. And then one night, they heard the horses, like the harpies, attacking the horses and killing them and eating them. Partially, I think this is a way for Matt Mercer in the game as the dungeon master to bring an air of verisimilitude to the world, where if you leave your animal tied up overnight, it's going to be attacked if it's in the wilderness, especially if you know there are these dangerous creatures around. So this may have been the scene in the show. The horses they go over the cliff and fall to their death along with the wagon and ostensibly the wolf creature, which then gets up and continues walking because it's undead to begin with. But so that could have been a nod. That scene could have been a nod to the death of the horses in the live stream, but it's also kind of reminiscent of the did you ever see the movie Van Helsing?
The Hugh Jackman?
Yeah, Hugh Jackman. Yeah. And there's a scene in that where I think there's because also that involves fighting vampires. And there's a scene where the carriage that is run off a cliff. And I don't remember if the horses died in that one or not, but that's just thinking of it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of it, but it was an overall effective scene. But you never like to see horses, animated or otherwise, die like that.
And here's a Elves Rings Tolkien little tidbit that we can throw in. David Wenham, who plays Faramir, was in that film Van Helsing.
Oh, you are right.
Little fun fact.
So,
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that we have some other points here on this one.
One that kind of ties into what can a show about D&D get away with that other fantasy material can't? And I think it's the modern swearing, modern references. And we've already seen a few of those references in this show. We have reference to bitch face, dumbass. Like, that's not a fantasy thing people would say. Even just, I can't remember, one Scanlan probably says breaking balls, like you're breaking my balls. Just because the show is, or D&D in general, unless you have a very polite group of friends, there's going to be swearing and modern conversation, like someone saying, "Oh, I just have resting bitch face." This show and other D&D content can get away with it because it's in the game. That's how people play it. But any other fantasy, I think, would have a hard time. Even in The Witcher, if someone was like, "Oh man, Geralt, you have resting bitch face," I'd be like, that's so out of the world, it would take me out of it. But it doesn't take me out of it in D&D.
Yeah, it's very tongue-in-cheek, right? It's a little wink to the audience in a certain way, and you recognize that it doesn't, little things like that don't matter in the world that the show is set in. People kind of, and I think this is pulled straight from D&D. You could have a player character say something that doesn't make a ton of sense or is antagonistic or something like that to a non-player character or to a dungeon master created or run character. And because it would otherwise bog down the game, the dungeon master just kind of moves past it and keeps things going and almost plays like a straight man to the Joker, and would be the player character. So you kind of get that with this translation of a Dungeons and Dragons game into a TV show. You're going to have these kind of not break the fourth wall necessarily. I don't think we'll have any of that, or we haven't had it as far as I can recall, but it is anachronistic in a certain way. And it's part of what it's like to play D&D, and it's effective in the show because it achieves humor, lightens the mood, and they don't do it overly much.
Yeah. And one of my last points, both happen during the same moment of the episode, so I'll talk about both of them at the same time. Around the fire, when they're having those moments of what's the worst thing you ever fought, we have a reference to Vax and the Rakshasa, which is a tiger-looking demon. That's mission, once you kill it, is to, like, it'll swear vengeance until it kills you, so it keeps coming back over and over again, right? Is the basic lore of a Rakshasa.
That's how it was played in the show, or the live stream rather, where it just kept coming back until eventually they tracked it down on a different plane of existence and killed it. Yeah.
So we got that. We got the constant callback to Keyleth killing things in just awful ways. So this is a spoiler for campaign 2, because Marisha just, I don't know if she thinks something's going to be cool, that it would be cool in like a movie. So she'll try to do it, but then in D&D rules, it doesn't really operate the same way. So in campaign 2, her character Bo sneaks up behind a guard, pulls his head back, and pours a vial of acid down his throat, thinking that it would like kill him immediately. But then Matt is like looking at the rules for acid, and he's like, okay, 1d6 every round. So then she basically has to sit there and hold his mouth shut as this acid just slowly kills him. And we just see these moments with Marisha, and then with the Keyleth, it shows her fighting a guy, and then she like ducks out of the way and he falls into lava and then just slowly dies. And she's like, "Oh, quiet, quiet, shh, quiet, quiet."
Yeah.
And it's just so scarring.
Yeah.
So that was a great moment, very humorous. Then we get Scanlan's big enemy was, while he was having sex with a woman, like this third or second head like comes out of her neck, and she ended up being like this demon thing. And then he has the line, "I still finished." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
just great.
Something that I really liked that scene because it was a way of acknowledging adventures that had already happened in the live stream up to that point, including the pretty extended campaign or adventure they had in the Underdark with fighting the Duergar. But another aspect of that was the Scanlan reading the book around the campfire. I think maybe that happened earlier. So it was a really, I thought it was a really good portrayal of the type of things that happen during this like downtime in a D&D campaign, where you have people reading spell books and identifying items, and you have these conversations between party members. So it just really seemed like something that would happen around a table where it's like, okay, you're at the campfire, you know, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And it was just kind of fun to see that, albeit abbreviated somewhat.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Scanlan's attuning to that scroll as he's trying to practice.
Yes, that's what it wasn't the book, it was the scroll. Yeah,
because then he finally gets it right in a later episode that we will talk about. And then my final thing from this episode in this moment is Percy has like an Arya Stark moment where he's kind of listing through the people he wants to kill as he's kind of thumbing his revolver. And this is, I think you've seen it before, but you see all the names now as he goes through of all the people that he wants to kill. But yeah, just a cool reference. I don't know if they intended to make it like Arya Stark, but that's how it came off to me anyway.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know if the list that Percy's character might predate Game of Thrones or predate the list.
Well, I just think
Arya.
that the visual of that,
okay,
him sitting right before he goes to sleep at the fire, going through the names, I think it was a callback to what they end up doing in Game of Thrones.
I can see that.
But cool, anyways.
All right, well, let's move on to episode 6, Spark of Rebellion. So the episode opens with a group of Whitestone resistance members meeting in a house, which is suddenly attacked by zombie giants who smash the roof and smash people and eat several. Enter Captain Kyrian Stonefell, who captures the leader of this group of resistance members named Archibald Desney. Cut to Vox Machina looking at the dead villagers hanging from the sun tree. They leave and are ushered into a home by a Whitestone native to avoid a patrolling zombie giant. It's at this point that Percy asks for Keeper Yennon, who they then later meet as she is preaching patience and hope to a congregation of people. She and Percy reconnect, and then Keeper Yennon leads the Vox Machina to a resistance hideout. At the hideout, Percy learns that Archibald, who is his childhood friend, is a leader of the resistance, but has been captured. Meanwhile, Archie is being tortured for information by Kyrian Stonefell and Duke Vedmeyer, both of whom are henchmen of the henchmen of the Briarwoods. Percy uses a scope on his rifle to find Archie's holding cell, and Vox Machina considers several plans to set him free before just landing on one, in which the group will split, with one half gaining access to the prison through the front door and the other heading in through the back door. The backdoor group struggles with actually opening the door, and we get some hijinks. Eventually, Vox Machina infiltrates the prison from both the front door and the back door. They are freeing resistance members, and eventually they free Archie. Kyrian Stonefell appears, and a fight ensues. During the fight, Percy goes off alone in pursuit of Stonefell, who he brutally kills while wearing his bird mask, and a smoke billows around him. Immediately following this, Vax'ildan confronts Percy, who turns his gun on Vax. Percy lowers his gun and then learns from Archie that Cassandra DeRollo, Percy's younger sister, is still alive. Up to this point, Percy believed that he was the only surviving DeRollo. The episode ends with Lord and Lady Briarwood, joined by another one of their henchmen, looking out over Whitestone alongside Cassandra DeRollo, Percy's sister. Lady Briarwood tells her that, quote, nothing has changed. And this references the return of her long-lost brother, Percy. And that's the end of episode 6, A Spark of Rebellion.
I know we're not nerdy enough, at least for any Critical Role content, due to the sheer volume of content. But I thought of a question because I, honest to the gods, had no idea what the answer was. What race is Stonefell?
That's a good question.
I want you to just go off of his appearance in this show. What race do you think he is?
Is there a canon answer to this?
Oh yeah, I have. I didn't write it in my notes because I didn't want you to see it, but I know the answer.
Okay. So Vedmire is supposed to be a Goliath.
Yep.
But Carrion Stonefell.
So Stonefell he's short and squat. He's gray.
Is he a Dwergar?
No. He's a human.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
Isn't that crazy? He looks nothing like a human.
Well, and jumping ahead, I guess he is featured in the final scene here, but Professor Anders is similarly very strangely proportioned for a human.
Yes.
And so to me, this is them, again, visually showing that these people are weird and creepy. And I mean, Stonefell is a really repulsive character in both his, I mean, again, tip of the hat to Darren DePaul, the voice actor who portrays him.
I was just about to say,
absolutely phenomenal portrayal.
I know you're a Darren DePaul fan, so I wanted to make sure he got a reference. But yeah. Anyway, he's a human. Good point on Anders, because I'm less shocked that Anders is a human because he still has more human characteristics, but Stonefell just does not look like a human to me at all. And I was kind of shocked when I found that out.
Yeah. I didn't mind.
Granted, they might make him look way more different in the show just for dramatic value than Matt described him in the stream. I don't really recall how he was described in the stream, but
I think he was dispatched relatively quickly. There were some, and we'll get to this more so as we get to the next couple episodes, but there were a lot of changes. I think this episode in particular was kind of created whole cloth. I think because they wanted the character of Archie, who there is an Archibald Desney in the live stream, but it was nothing like the character that we saw. It was an older person who worked for Percy's father in the castle, was not Percy's friend, did not lead the resistance, did lead the resistance, but not in the same way as Archie in the show. There was no, I don't think there was a prison break. I think there's just another attack on a house. But during that, they kill Stonefell, and it happens pretty quickly. I think he was relatively minor in the live stream, and they wanted to amp him up for the show just because you want to get good bang for your buck in these episodes, which again, amp up the creepiness of him, make him this brutal character. It was effective.
Yeah. And since you brought up Archibald, we get Dominic Monaghan, our Mariatic Brandy book, voicing Archie. Again, just showing how Critical Role was able to get these A-list actors to come in, and friends, like you said, Darren DePaul, who has been a special guest on Critical Role throughout all the campaigns, correct? He goes back to campaign 1, I believe.
He was definitely in campaign 1. He was, what's his name? Sprig, the gnome.
Yeah.
Which his portrayal of that gnome was so good. I think actually that character, or that D&D character, he originally played in a game with Matt Mercer's mom, decades ago.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I am a Darren DePaul fan. Also, appearing for the first time, Rory McCain, who is the Hound in Game of Thrones, voices Duke Vedmire, a character that we'll get more of in the upcoming episode. And I don't think we mentioned it, but in episode 1, Archmage Allura Vysoren is voiced by Indira Varma, who was in Game of Thrones as what is her name? The mother of the Sand Snakes, Oberyn Martell's paramour.
I was going to say
Ilaria Sand.
Yeah, I was going to say Oberyn's significant other.
Illyria Sand, and she was also in Rome, which is a great show that I think influenced Game of Thrones. So again, pointing to the fact that Vox Machina, the cast of Critical Role, they're pretty well connected, and I'm excited to see who they're going to get in season 2 for these special guest appearances.
Yeah. So you brought up the Duke, and one scene going back to just how intense some of these scenes can be, bringing it over from the stream, having the Duke rip Archie's ear off.
Oh God.
I don't remember seeing that in previous watches, and now rewatching it, I remember having him have the bandage on his ear, but I don't recall ever seeing the Duke legit rip his ear off. And they don't show you the entire thing, but they do show you up where the top of the ear connects. There's a moment where he's pulling and pulling. You see Archie like screaming, and then you see like the red start to bleed, and they just let you know that that's what's happening. And I was like, oh, like it gave me chills just thinking about that happening and how much that would hurt. But yeah, just intense.
This episode was directed by Quentin Tarantino. But yeah, no, very brutal. I don't recall that the ear was ripped off with just brute strength. I can't remember if it was like, if I thought it was cut off with a knife or a sword or something like that. But yeah, that was brutal. And then this episode opens with people having their heads smashed by these giant zombies.
Yeah. I will say though, I don't think it takes too much brute strength. I'm pretty sure I could rip an ear off if I like really wanted to. Isn't it what they say about like biting a carrot is like biting a finger off?
Yeah.
I totally feel like I could rip someone's ear off if I needed to.
I think you don't need to. It's actually, it doesn't require as much strength as that. I think though they went out of the way to make it look kind of casual in the way that Vedmire could do it. You know, he didn't have to like brace Archie against the wall. It just kind of did it like you would peel an onion or something like that.
I was going to say peel a banana, but
that's probably a better illustration.
Because peeling
an onion can be kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to do.
Sorry, I made dinner earlier.
Speaking of heads getting crushed in, zombie giants. It's another like side quest from Vox Machina, the stream that they didn't include in this season. They actually go to like a giant village that is empty.
Yeah.
And then discover in Whitestone that all of those giants have been killed and then repurposed by Lady Briarwood. So cool to see them. We get more of them in the upcoming episodes of the fight. We actually get a split the party reference with Scanlan saying, "That's stupid, don't split the party." That's just a classic D&D trope.
Yeah, never split the party, and they immediately proceed to do it.
And then I completely forgot about it until you were doing your recap. The front door, back door teams, just like the reference to I'm going to be in the back door. And then just how much trouble they have getting in. I mean, we have Vax with his keys. It doesn't work. Scanlan can't get it. Percy tries to go in through a window and falls out the window. Like this really happens in D&D, where if you keep rolling poorly, you just can't open a door. Like this basic concept.
I think there's one moment where Vax like accidentally stabs Scanlan trying to open the door, which was great. And that reminded me of a scene from the live stream where they're trying to break into a different structure. I think it was like an old abandoned church or something like that, but the door had been blocked with a piece of wood, like barred with a piece of wood, and they tried to use a sword to move it. And so Scanlan grabbed onto the tip of a sword, and Matt was instantly just said, oh, you take, 5 points of damage. Because yeah, you would take damage if you grabbed a sharp tip of a sword and tried to use it to lift a piece of wood. But that's the type of thing that happens when you're kind of goofily playing Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Something else I just realized in the scene where they're trying to come up with their plan of infiltrating the prison, and I think the first suggestion is Keyleth saying that she's going to talk to the animals and tell them to go steal the keys to the prison or something like that. And then, Grog's idea is just to go in and kill everyone. And then someone's like, well, what about Archie? It's like, oh yeah, we kill Archie too. Mm-hmm. Which is funny, just kind of demonstrating their personalities, but also a good nod to how many times Vox Machina would, the actual actors, the players would try to plan their attack or plan their maneuvers
ahead of time.
They would try to do it ahead of time, and it would be so harebrained. And of course, because it's a game and there are dice rolls and the DM can kind of guide things, it usually works out both for humor and for effect. But that was really fun. It kind of reminded me a little bit of when we've played Dungeons and Dragons, just like, okay, here's the situation. And then people start planning. And I think there was like one occasion early on when the plan was to like forge a note and put it in a canoe. And then
that's right.
And then like try to get the canoe to under its, like, I think the idea was, well, the canoe will float, and then they'll find the people that we want to find the message will find the message. And I had to be very clear that the river was flowing in the opposite direction, and the canoe would not go to where you wanted it to go. But just
there's a lot of those, and even like Matt, in the times where I DM, and I've seen you make the face too, when you're just sitting there listening to your players come up with these plans, and you just have this deadpan look where you're just like, oh my god. None of this is going to go the way that you think it is. And this was one of those moments where I could feel in the stream where they're like making plans and Matt just staring at them going, oh, okay, well. But then again, like whenever players do make these plans, they almost never go the way you're anticipating them to. Like you said, with dice rolls, like the backdoor team, all you have to do is go in through the back door, but they can't roll high enough to unlock the door. So then your plans go completely out the window. And then you're able to get in because a bowl of piss is thrown on you.
Yeah, which
basically.
It's one of those things where I guess maybe this is becoming a little bit of a D&D episode, but there's a D&D content creator, longtime DM called Matt Colville, who will put out videos on YouTube about how to run Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the things he talks about is failing forward, where even if your attempt fails, it can still advance whatever it is that you're doing. And so I kind of view them failing to break into the back door, but then having the back door open anyway. It's like, okay, you're failing forward, but that always comes with a consequence. It's like, now there's a situation that you have to face. In this case, the situation was you get a bucket full of piss thrown on you.
Yeah. And that's an important lesson in D&D in general, because as like a player, you always fear losing because you're going to die. But a good DM will be like, oh, well, you'll get taken captive.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily, your player isn't going to die just because they lose an encounter. And yeah, so it's
like even
D&D.
the team that was attacking the front door, I think it started with Vexalia trying to seduce one of the guards or distract him with flirting, right? And then it just devolves into Grog killing everyone, which is exactly the type of thing that would happen. It's like, okay, one of the party members tries to, make a charisma check. Oh, you rolled a natural one. They, it fails. They don't like you. They instantly find you out. And then the barbarian's like, that's it. I'm swinging this axe.
Plan B.
Yeah. Plan B, kill everyone.
And then this episode ends. We get the reveal that Cassandra DeRollo is alive and Percy isn't alone. And she's in a room with Delilah and Anders, and they insinuate that she's kind of a part of the plans. But yeah, just a great cliffhanger for episode 6. Percy's not alone. He kind of has a panic moment, and we'll see what happens in episode 7.
We will. All right. Sean, this has been fun. Thanks for taking the time and talking this through. We will do it again next week, looking at the next 3 episodes in season 1 of The Legend of Vox Machina as we prepare for the release of season 2. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, just that we've covered 6 episodes of Vox Machina, Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon Prime, if you want to find it. And we are halfway through the first season, covering first half of the first season. So this is flying by. We only have 6 episodes left, and a lot of action happens in the next 3 episodes. So I'm excited to rewatch and have a chat with you about it. That's it for me. Like we said in the beginning, please like and share. If you have friends who are interested in anything fantasy, nerdy, please send them our way. Otherwise, that's it. Bye.
Bye, everybody.